Last week, we left off more or less at this level, and this is where we will resume. Uh, for a while in the 6th century, the Ostrogoths ruled Rome, and the Ostrogoths kings were, by and large, pretty much hands off. They left the Bishop of Rome do the things that the Bishop of Rome usually did and did not interfere with church business. In the 6th century, the Byzantines came in trying to recover some of the lost territories. Justinian conquered Rome in 537. His wife was a Monophyite. Those were the ones. Asia was the Theodora was a heretic. But nevertheless, the Pope was detained until he accepted the orders from the emperor. At that time, the Eastern Emperor was trying to influence and actually jailed the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, until he accepted. Whatever they agreed on was not agreed by the Eastern clergy. That was a problem that occurred over and over again. Rome and Constantinople would agree to reunite, and the clergy from the Eastern Church would say, no, we do not want to be part of the Church of Rome. That must have happened at least 6 times. And it was always the clergy, usually with the help of the faithful, but not the leaders. The leaders would agree, but not the clergy. The Bishop of Rome during this period of time was approved or confirmed by the emperor. The emperor just said, yeah, sure, whatever. But this was usually, the choice was left to the people of Rome. They were the ones that would elect or nominate the bishop.
So when you say the people of Rome, because I normally think of the Pope being elected by cardinals.
Yes.
So it was
not yet.
Oh, okay.
Not yet.
It was literally
just the people.
Wow. Okay.
Just the people. People of Rome would get together like a homeowners association, saying, we need a new leader. You want him? No, he doesn't want to. How about her? Yeah, well, maybe. What do you say? Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Done. That's the way the early popes were elected.
That's so funny, thinking about all the pomp and circumstance now.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, no. We'll see how much grief the papacy went to arrive at the election of the Pope.
The process.
True grief. How to arrive at that process. So communications between East and West were slow. The empire was under attack until Gregory was elected Pope in 590, at the end of the 6th century. Gregory came from a noble family. He was a wealthy Roman. He had had a fabulous education. He had traveled all over Europe. He had lived in France. He had gone to Bologna. He had been a diplomat. He had been in the court of the emperor in Constantinople. He had been everywhere. He was a really able man. Okay. On the other hand, he could not convince the emperor for help, to send Rome any help. So Gregory took matters in his own hands. He engaged the Lombards and the Franks. He sent them out to northern Italy and to. It's difficult to keep the thread.
Let's always have to wait for her to slow.
Yeah, I think there's always 3 beats, so they'll start them out in a second.
So he engaged the Franks, he sent ambassadors to France. He mobilized all the real estate owned by the papacy in order to feed the people of Rome. We're not going to sell this to other people. We're going to keep it here and feed ourselves.
Excuse me, but what do you mean engage the Lombards in to do what? Lombards and Franks. You said that he engaged the Lombards
Yes,
and the Franks.
yes,
So to do what?
diplomatically,
But yeah, but to do what? Why did
to
he?
be civil to each other, not to
Oh, you
attack
mean-
each other,
Yeah,
to,
during the.
to recognize each other as entities.
Also, this was during conflict.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in order to decrease or
This is
minimize conflict.
This is during the time that actually kind of the fall of Rome and the empire.
Exactly.
So there was a lot of,
Yeah.
A lot of commotion, a lot of fighting, a lot of grief going on.
Like juggling seas.
So he brought organization, order, peace to the Romans. He was a major stabilizing force at a time when everything was very unstable. The most important thing that he did was he turned to the West. He said to Eastern Europe, he said, we don't need you. We like you. You're not going to defend us. You're not going to help us. So we are going to engage the West. So he had friendly relations with France and Spain. He sent monks to England. He sent missionaries to Germany, and he also standardized the liturgy and the music. So wherever you went to a Roman Catholic church in Western Europe, you heard the same music and used the same texts. In the 7th century, the prestige of the papacy grew. The Church of Rome and the papacy became institutions. The emperor was distant, and the feeble attempts at reconciliation after the Great Easter Schism or feeble will continue. There were many episodes like this. The Patriarch of Constantinople proposed a solution to one of the heresies. The Pope concluded that the second person of the Trinity had only one will. This theory was condemned by the Third Council of Constantinople. So everybody was a heretic in everybody else's eyes.
just going back one page, could you explain a little bit that the second person, one will, what that meant, or?
The Logos is supposed to be the second person of the Trinity. The Trinity
Okay, so
is
that was
supposed to
Jesus
be
Christ.
the Father, the Son, or the Logos, or the Word, and the Holy Ghost.
Right.
The Logos is supposed to come out of the Father, out of his immense love. Love for whom is not defined. The Holy Spirit is supposed to be the product of the love between the Father and the Son. That's how the Catholic Church teaches all this hair-splitting dogma.
So this is the concept that there's three persons in one God, so
Right.
one will. Okay.
The Logos would be the second person, or the Christ, or the Word. That's the best I can explain it, but maybe 60 years ago I was better at it,
But no, that
but not now. So this was a process by which both sides condemned each other. And right, I must have.
Slide it forward. So you're the one setting it up.
Oh, very good.
Yeah,
You have to push hard enough.
yeah.
Thank you. So the emperor came up with a document called the typos, not the typos, the typos. And he prohibited everybody to discuss the issue of the will of Christ or the wills of Christ. He just forbid everybody. We're not going to discuss this. On the other hand, the Pope in Rome called a synod, a group of ecclesiastical men, and they rejected the emperor's document, the typos. So the emperor sent a force to have the Pope arrested in Rome. He was shipped out to Constantinople. He was tried, sentenced to death, but he died before he could be put to death. This is the relationship that the emperor had with the church at that time. The emperor could pull out a pope, ship him out of Rome, and be responsible to nobody but himself. This is another example in the 7th century. There were two men who claimed to be popes. Well, they were replaced by a third, Sergius I, who was demoted by the emperor. But when the emperor sent troops to Rome, the Romans themselves protected Sergius and kept him as pope, as bishop of Rome. So neither party was always successful in achieving what they wanted. In the 8th century, East and West grew farther apart. Ravenna, that is on the Adriatic, and Rome were both threatened by the Lombards. But there was, Constantinople could not send any troops. There was really no actual emperor in the East either, because they had their own problems with who was going to follow who. But that is beyond the scope of this study. This is where interesting things, when things get interesting. In the 8th century, the top dog in Western Europe, the leader of the most of the Franks, which were originally Vandals, was Charles Martel. Charles Martel had two sons. One was Pippin, also known as Pippin the Short. You wonder why. And the other one was Carloman. Not Charlemagne, Carloman. So there's Charles Martel with two sons, Carloman and Pippin the Short. All right, Carloman became kind of bored of being ruler. He had most of the territories in the east, like what is now Poland and Czechoslovakia and Austria and Slovenia. So he gave those territories to his son, Drogo. I always felt bad for Drogo. Imagine growing up with a name like that, coming to go to school with his peers. It's a good name for a dog, I imagine. But poor Drogo. So Drogo was, I don't think he was even a teenager when he received all these lands to rule. And his father, Carloman, went into a monastery. That was the eastern part of Europe. The western part of Europe was controlled by Pippin the Short. Pippin the Short went to the Pope and said, "Hi, Pope, I'm Pippin the Short. Are you game to make a deal?" And the Pope said, "What kind of deal?" "Territories." I want those territories in the east. The Pope said, okay, Shorty, what's in it for me? And Shorty said, territories. In other words, you help me acquire land, I'm gonna help you acquire land too. So that was the collusion between the Pope and Pippin. And they deposed poor Drogo. Drogo was a kid. He had absolutely no sense of politics, no sense of defense, no sense of maneuvering, no sense of coalition.
It's not any good advisors even.
He knew absolutely nothing. Poor Drogo. So Pippin ended up with all this territory. And eventually, the Pope anointed Pippin at Reims in 1754. By then, this was a different Pope.
Right, and could you just go back to that last slide? Polluted with Pope Zacharias.
Yep.
That was he Western or Eastern Church?
I think that was his real name,
Okay, because it
Pope
sounds Greek.
Zacharias. But by the
But he
time
was the Western, but it was the
It
Western.
was a Western Church.
He was in Rome, right? He was the Pope in Rome.
right,
Oh, okay.
yeah, they were in Rome, and
The popes take the name of some saint,
I see.
right? So that wasn't necessarily his name, right?
right.
Okay, got it.
So he might have been George Smith. He likes that. All right.
All right, so the papacy at this time exchanged or gave Pippin legitimacy in exchange for protection. It also asserted the Pope's authority to give power to the sovereign. Therefore, in the following year, Pippin and the Franks invaded northern Italy and secured all of these territories from the Lombards. Pippin did not keep his territories. He was true to his word. He gave them to the Bishop of Rome. So the Bishop of Rome became a small kingdom, a small king. First from the donation of Constantine, second from the donation of Pippin. Right, that's how the papal states came to be, how the Pope became a ruler. The donation of Pippin established the papacy as a temporal ruler. Charlemagne, not Carloman, Charlemagne was the eldest son of Pippin. When Pippin died, the old kingdom was divided between Carloman, who was in not in a convent.
Monster.
Yes, thank you. Someplace, and Charlemagne, there were a lot of intrigues going on. Like Charlemagne had married the daughter of the king of the Lombards, and he discarded her to marry somebody else. There was a lot of intrigue and unsavory actions at that time. In any event, Charlemagne confirmed the donation of Pippin, and the Pope, which by now was a new Pope, sent letters to him saying, look, I am loyal to Christianity, I'm loyal to the emperor. Because Charlemagne was basically a reasonable person. He was responsible, or he felt responsible, for the spiritual well-being of his subjects too. Not just his physical, or the physical welfare of his subjects, but also the spiritual welfare. He believed that the church and the state should be united as allied forces for the betterment of society.
So it looks like that Pope Leo liked to drink coffee in a blue mug. I'm sorry. I just, I mean, there's a blue mug.
Down here,
Yes, he's drinking coffee in a blue mug.
yeah, most of these lines have pennies.
I could,
Who is this?
No, he's got a coffee cup. That's what we're laughing
Got
at.
a coffee cup.
yeah, see the blue coffee cup.
Well, he's getting ready for Monday morning.
I wonder if he goes to Rise.
Now, he'll be there at Panera. All right. So Charlemagne wrote to the Pope and said, look, Your Holiness, it is your part to pray and my part to fight. You pray, we fight. You don't fight, we don't pray that much. But basically, our two roles are separate and different. We enter now a period that is both glorious and at the same time shameful. First of all, let's take care of this. Pope Leo was accused of immorality. Maybe he was playing with children, God knows. He was attacked by a mob in Rome and almost killed. But when Charlemagne, who was the emperor, questioned him, Pope Leo said, it's all a lie. I never did it. I'm innocent. And Charlemagne basically said, okay, well, you say so, I'll go along with that. I'll give you a chance. Then on Christmas Day in the year 800, it's a great date to remember. Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne Emperor and Augustus of the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire persisted in Europe through the Renaissance almost to modern times. Well, how did this happen? The papacy claimed the authority to crown the emperor. On the other hand, the emperor was acknowledged as the leader of the lay section of Christianity. And the power of the emperor came from God through the Pope to the emperor. The Church of Rome, led by the Pope, was now the Church of Western Europe. That was a great moment in the history of the papacy and in the history of Christianity, and really in the history of Western culture. Because Charlemagne, we think of him as a barbarian. He wasn't quite the barbarian. He sponsored a sort of renaissance in Western Europe. He brought peace and prosperity to Europe. He developed the Carolingian script with which people could communicate, and also the coinage, so that people from Spain all the way through Central Europe could exchange wealth and could buy and sell things. It's something that not even the euro has been able to achieve. But Charlemagne did from one end to the other. It was really a time of a grand alliance of temporal and spiritual power. If ever church and state worked together, it was then, under Charlemagne. Unfortunately, this does not last. Fortunately, Pope Nicholas was a giant in the 9th century. This man was decisive, tenacious, assertive, consistent, and had a huge nose. I mean, anybody during Mass who did not behave, he just had to sneeze, wipe them out. He claimed authority and jurisdiction over all bishops. He engaged bishops, archbishops, patriarchs, kings, emperors, metropolitans, everybody in communication. He was very, very active. Actually, he was the center of power in the West once Charlemagne had died. After Nicholas, the prestige of the papacy declined. The papacy did not have an army, so it could not defend itself militarily. And the families in Rome became more and more powerful. Pope Hadrian II was weak. John VII was primarily political and was murdered in 882. Then comes Pope Formosus. Formosus had been a diplomat, an envoy, an ambassador. He had a brilliant career, but he was excommunicated in 876 on charges of treason and coveting the papacy and things like that. So after his impeachment, he was rehabilitated. He was even elected pope in 891.
Oh, so he
On
was
the way.
excommunicated prior to becoming pope.
Yes, of course. And then he was rehabilitated. He was brought back in. Because the powers that be or the powers that were changed in Rome. But on the way, he made a lot of enemies. Like any big man on his way up, or woman, makes enemies. So when Pope Formosus died dead in 896, Stephen VI had his body exhumed, that is, pulled out of the grave, had him dressed in papal clothes,
Oh my God.
had him sat on a papal chair, and had a trial on all kinds of made-up charges.
Oh, and guess what? The defense disintegrated.
Yeah,
It
he certainly.
He fell apart.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Your choice of words is interesting.
You picked that right away. So poor Formosus, he is dragged through the streets of Rome and thrown into the Tiber. Fortunately, somebody downstream picked up the body and eventually buried him,
But they sold the roads first, I bet.
except his 3 fingers that had been cut off. I think he wore rings of power. That's where that happened. So this is the famous cadaver synod. Pope Formosus stopped. He was disintegrated.
Let me just ask a question. So how does the Catholic Church view that? Was that like a travesty? Or do you know how the Catholic Church today?
Well, there was a lot of unhappiness, and but he had a lot of enemies, and the enemies were happy about it.
Okay.
The
It
same
was
thing.
the church that trapped him. It was the Pope who trapped him, so that
Right.
the church.
And that was back then, though. But
Oh, you mean
what would
today?
today's church say about that issue?
Probably nothing. Probably don't like it.
I know.
They don't say anything from anything.
No, I think they have been trying to.
The Middle Ages were,
Oh, I understand.
Dark Ages were even worse. These were more to come.
Okay.
Poor Formosus was just at the beginning. Now, Pope Stephen VI, who had tried Formosus, was himself deposed, imprisoned, and strangled to death. That's another dead pope. The next pope was overthrown by a rival anti-pope. And Sergius III had both arrested, incarcerated, and terminated. That's a lot of deaths here, all for the throne of the papacy. Pope Sergius III is believed to have been the father of Pope John the 11th, with this lady called Marozia.
Makes soap operas easy to follow. It's more complicated.
No, follow. The only thing to understand is that there was a lot of corruption. And these people had no laws and no morals. Even though they were the Bishop of Rome and the Diocese of Rome, they had no morals.
So how do you call that a church? Jesus.
Call that a church.
Yeah. These people had no morals.
No,
They actually called us a
no.
And what about what about the normal politics?
That's what says
How
that.
do they feel about all this?
Now let's go on so that we don't fall behind. We're all scandalized here. We're judging things by our standards in today's day and
Yes.
age. These were the Dark Ages. And this was exclusively to Rome. And exclusively actually to the Lateran Palace. The popes were not at the Vatican yet. They were at the Lateran Palace. Talk more about Marozia. Marozia was a teenager when she had this baby from Pope Sergius III, who would eventually become Pope John the 11th. Her father was a Roman nobleman, a wealthy man called Theophylact. So Theophylact was also the keeper of the treasuries. He was a trusted man and the commander of the small army, the head of security. He was also the uncle of Pope Sergius II. In other words, it was all the family. He was married to Theodora, and Theodora was the power behind the throne. She was the one who moved a lot of the pieces back and forth. Marozia was the mother of Pope John the 11th and was the lover of Pope Sergius before. Well, when she grew up, even though she already had a child, Marozia married Alberic and had a child, Alberic II. Very imaginative. Give Alberic son the next thing. Alberic II was the brother to Pope John the 11th because they were both children of Marozia. Alberic I, who had married Marozia, was killed, and Marozia then married Guy of, it's not really Guy, it's Guy of Tuscany, who was an enemy of Pope John X. So Guy of Tuscany attacked Rome, captured Pope John X, and imprisoned him at the Castel Sant'Angelo. You get the idea. A lot of infighting, a lot of intermarriage, a lot of... Now, so far, Marozia has had one illegitimate child and has married two very powerful men. She wasn't done. Guy of Tuscany died, and then Marozia married Hugh of Arles, who was king of Italy. Marozia, I don't know, there must have been something about it. She changed more hands than a dollar bill, so to speak. She married all these very powerful men until one of her children, Alberic II, led a revolt which deposed his stepfather, Hugh of Arles, and captured and imprisoned Marozia in the big prison at Rome until she died there. And rumor has it that she was suffocated to death because she didn't die fast enough. Alberic was the father of Pope John the 12th, who died of a fractured skull at the hands of a jealous husband when caught in bed with his wife. He had trouble. More issues. Alberic's second son, Albert III, imaginative naming, was so powerful that he arranged through bribery to have his son elected pope as Benedict IX. Benedict, on the other hand, was driven out of Rome by an anti-pope, but returned to Rome for 3 months in 1045. Well, Benedict was pope,
Papacy.
but then sold the papacy to his godfather, who became Pope Gregory VI.
Dear.
This went on and on and on until the emperor or the king of Germany said, enough. You Romans cannot rule yourselves. Home rule has not worked. It's time for us to take over. So the emperor came to Rome, deposed all the popes and anti-popes that still exist, and installed German popes. The lesson to remember is that in the middle of the 11th century, the church changed from Roman leadership to German leadership because the Roman leadership just could not function. The families of Rome could not function. That's a lesson to be remembered of that very dark period of the papacy between the middle of the 9th century and the middle of the 11th century. Pope Leo the Ninth was appointed by the king. He called a synod in Rome, and the problems there were simony, clerical chastity, marriage, and concubinage. It did bring some very, very powerful and effective men into the leadership of the church, including Hildebrand, about whom we will say a lot. Then came the Great Eastern Schism. Leo the Ninth entered a controversy, was more of a conversation with the Patriarch of Constantinople over the Byzantine churches in southern Italy and the Latin churches in Constantinople. In other words, the bishop or the Patriarch of the East had churches and parishes in southern Italy. The Church of Rome had parishes and churches and dioceses in the East. Who had control over which? Well, we would have said, you control yours, we'll control ours.
Wasn't Germany involved at that point? I thought it just.
Well, they were the German popes. They were still the Roman. popes.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but so there was this mixture of geographic mixture. It wasn't pure east and west.
It was not 100%, but there was a conflict over a small number of parishes and dioceses and churches, both in the east and in the west.
Okay.
Do these belong to you or do these belong to me? When the bishop dies and I appoint one, do you appoint? Right. When a new bishop takes over the diocese, they usually pay the higher 1 year's income. Does he pay you or does he pay me?
Right.
I appointed him, but it's your diocese. You see the conflict? So this is why these two were at each other's throats. The issue was that the Patriarch of Constantinople was Michael Cerularius. Michael Cerularius must have been something else. Apparently, in the history books, he was a pious man, a holy man, learned man, fair man, but hard-headed as they come. He was confrontational, in your face, intransigent, imperious. He was not a diplomat.
Okay.
He was not a negotiator. He was very much of an autocrat. I say this, and that is it. So all of these, the Western Church, the Bishop of Rome, sent a commission to Constantinople to try to negotiate this. But these men were also quite certain of their rights or their correctness. When all these alpha males got together, there was going to be trouble. You get the idea. Big, powerful men trying to negotiate something over which they would not agree to anything. So that was the commission. And Michael Cerularius said, yeah, big deal. You came all the way here. I'm not going to receive you. We have nothing to discuss. I have already discussed everything in my letters. I have proposed a definitive solution. This is going to be it. So both sides were convinced that they were correct, and neither wanted to compromise or even listen to what the other group had to say. Therefore, on July 16th, 1054, Humbert walked into the Church of Holy Wisdom while Michael Cerularius was saying Mass and served him with a document of excommunication. On the altar, he put it down. So Michael Cerularius and his associates were all excommunicated, thrown out of the Christian church. The Pope in Rome, the Bishop of Rome, Pope Leo IX, had actually died before this had happened. So Michael Cerularius ended up turning around and excommunicating him after death. So both sides were excommunicated. One of the subtleties of excommunication is that you're not supposed to have any conversation or dealing with an excommunicated person. So both sides excommunicating each other effectively cut communications completely. Of course, there were always some kinds of threats to be followed, but officially they were forbidden by church law to have any communication with each other. That was the great Eastern Schism that to a large degree still exists. In the Middle Ages, the relations with the German kings provided security and stability, because the people of Rome just could not handle the affairs of the papacy. The existence of the papal states were confirmed. Hungary and Poland remained faithful to the Church of Rome, even though they are actually closer to Constantinople. Negotiations were always kind of maintained under the table. The one thing that really helped a lot Christianity in Europe in general was the monastic movement, the monasteries. This is a picture of what is left of the monastery at Cluny in Burgundy. You've been there? No? If you go there, you won't want to leave. It's very much like Avignon. You don't want to leave. Beautiful land, beautiful buildings, beautiful sloping hills, great wine, great food. And the thing about Cluny, there were about 1,100 monasteries throughout Europe, was that the monks wrote and rewrote the scriptures. And therefore, more and more of these books became available. The other thing was that they taught generations of churchmen how to be holy, how to be leaders, how to be reformers. It was like a boarding school for popes. So many of the popes came through Cluny. They would go to Cluny for several years until they were called to be ambassador to Hungary or to go to England or here or there. They learned languages. They knew or they learned how to negotiate with others. And a lot of the translations also from the Greek and Latin were made in Cluny. All the manuscripts from the East, from Greece, from the ancient Romans, they were translated at Cluny. Cluny was a major, like a battery that recovered all that energy and kept it together. I think this is the last slide on this. We go to the next one, please.
So monasteries were viewed kind of positively by the general.
Speak up.
The monasteries were, and the monks were viewed kind of positively by the local folks.
Yes,
Because they were, okay.
yes.
So with all the intrigue going on in Rome, the monasteries maintained,
Exactly.
which kind of gives you some sense of why the Catholic Church survived, because you think of the other thing going on, like it was crazy, right? But,
We'll review a little bit and then go on.
Oops, sorry, that was me.
All right. We talked about the Tome before, but Leo the Great had it read at the Council of Chalcedon to great applause, and that was one of the events that increased the prestige of the Pope of Rome. Leo the Great was also who met with Attila the Hun and really enhanced the authority of the Bishop of Rome. Gregory the Great, we have said this several times, turned to the west. And Stephen II was the one who anointed Pippin the Short as emperor. He also received the territories and became the first Pope King. On Christmas Day, year 800, Leo III crowned Charlemagne emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, and then the Great Eastern Schism occurred finally on July 16th, 1054. These are the holdings of the papal lands. Rome is here. These are the lands that were given by Constantine, and these are the lands given by Pippin the Short and confirmed by Charlemagne. So it was a small kingdom, but the papacy really did not have an army, did not have any protection. Had a small security force, or like a police force, but that was about it. The papacy was elective, not hereditary, and there was considerable intrigue against friend and foe because it was a small kingdom in the middle of larger kingdoms. Look how small this was compared to the rest of Italy. Even the kingdom of Sicily, of the two Sicilies, was larger than the kingdom of the Papal States. They also owned some land in southern France, like in Avignon, and also in southern Italy. But the bulk of the land was in this swath of land right from the Mediterranean all the way to the Adriatic. The major problems were in the Middle Ages, lay investiture, simony, nepotism, and clerical celibacy. Lay investiture was the lay ruler, the emperor, the king, the duke, giving power to a churchman, basically making him bishop of a diocese. That's where all the real estate and all the wealth was, in the diocese. Not in the archdiocese, not in the parishes. The real property went to the diocese. So that was the issue. One of the issues was, can a lay ruler, a duke, a king, invest, that is, give power and influence to a bishop? Simony is comes from the story of Simon Magus in the Act of the Apostles, that he saw the apostles working miracles. I went over and said, "Hey, guys, how about letting me in on some of your skills? I'll be glad to pay you some money if you teach me or let me have some of your skills." In other words, buying church favors with money. That's simony. Nepotism, of course, is the awarding positions to one's relatives, and clerical celibacy remains an issue to this day in many ways. All of these things always came into conflict with the emperor. Just a few examples. Otto was a German king, young man, who was also Holy Roman Emperor. He appointed his brother, nepotism, Bruno, who was chancellor. He appointed his brother Archbishop of Cologne and Duke of Lorraine. Gave him some very, very wealthy appointments. Let's remember that the second son in medieval Europe inherited very little. It was the second son, and this was throughout Europe. The second son of a nobleman, was kind of noble, but did not inherit any property.
This way should, first one should get there.
They probably had trouble getting in. What's the dude?
So the other thing that happened at this time was that it became mandatory in Germany. That is 10% of everything that you earned or made or produced or grew or stole went to the church. 10%, that's tithing. And that existed, my understanding is that it almost existed into the 20th century in places like Germany. So tithing became mandatory at this time in the 10th century.
It still is a Germany, it's a tax.
It is?
Church tax.
Thank you. Good. So this is the famous painting by Raphael of Pope Leo X with his two nephews that were also cardinals. By this time, cardinals had already been developed. Going back to Pope John XII, he was the one who was brained by the jealous husband. He and the emperor came to an agreement, and this was the Diploma Othonianum. In the diploma, the emperor acknowledged the donation of Pippin, accepted the pope's secular control over the territories. In other words, this is your kingdom. All right? Not only are you bishop, but you are also ruler. You can make the laws. You can decide what is legal or not. You can decide cases and impose penance. You are the ruler. The Pope of Rome, according to the diploma, was to be elected by the people and the clergy. And finally, the Pope would take an oath of allegiance to the emperor. Okay, sounds good? Yeah, sure. As soon as the emperor left Rome, the Pope began scheming against the emperor. The emperor returned, flushed him out, and installed his own pope. The Romans rose, deposed the pope, and reinstated John the XII. After he was braved, another man was elected pope. Finally, Otto returned again, exiled everybody, and reinstated Leo VIII. Again, the emperor once again taking control of the situation because the Romans could not control themselves. We come now to one of the most brilliant moments of the papacy. This had to do with Hildebrand, Pope Gregory VII. Pope Gregory VII was quite an intellectual. He was an advisor, a chancellor, treasurer, ambassador, counselor. He was from Cluny. He had spent time in Cluny and had been educated there. He was a holy man. He was worldly, but he was holy. He was a great disciplinarian. He requested obedience to the Bishop of Rome and declared himself having universal rule over the whole of Christendom in things religious. So he claimed jurisdiction over the whole church. These are some of the things that he is said to have written down. I think they are in your handout. He obviously has a very high opinion of himself. He alone may, all princes shall kiss the feet of the Pope alone. The Roman Church has never erred. He may depose and reinstate bishops without assembling a synod. So he thought very highly of himself and of his office. He got into trouble with King Henry IV. King Henry IV was still insisting on naming bishops and archbishops. The immediate problem was the Archbishop of Milan. So they wrote each other letters because one side wanted one candidate and the other side wanted another candidate. So those letters are in the Vatican archives. They have survived all of these 1,000 and some years. They're still there. I don't think that they get shown or they get exposed to the air very often. They're sealed places, but the contents are widely known. Well, the letters went something like this. Letters from the Pope to King Henry. Bishop Gregory, servant of the servants of God, was the first one who used that term. I am the servant of the servants of God. Offer you my blessing if you are obedient to the apostolic chair. I encourage you to find a bishop and get confession. We shall agree on a penance and your penitence. This is a pretty respectful letter. It's not a lengthy letter. This is just the first and last sentence. But it's a respectful letter. Dear Henry, you're having fun next door.
And I asked her to turn it down a little bit, but I'm more concerned about what's gonna happen to the recording, because I think it's gonna be really garbled.
It won't damage the recording. We've done this in the classroom in the evenings and we have the same problem, and it doesn't, the recording considers it ancillary noise. I can almost guarantee you it's like,
All right, so the letter exists, and the letter is on the internet. In translation and everywhere. It's a very respectful letter, firm, but very respectful. A letter from one king to another, from the Bishop of Rome to the king of Germany. But these were two alpha men once again, and they clash. So the letter from Henry IV back to the Pope, it's really a matter, it's fighting words. He says, Henry, think not through usurpation, but through the holy ordination of God, to Hildebrand, the Pope. I press it not Pope, but false monk. You, therefore, damned by this curse and by the judgment of all our bishops, descend and relinquish the apostolic chair which thou hast usurped. Descend, descend, descend to be damned throughout the ages. This is a letter from the king to another king, to the Bishop of Rome. Well, Gregory was not going to take it down. So he thought about it for months, what to do, and he finally wrote a letter to St. Peter, saying, Dear St. Peter, I am the Bishop of Rome as your legitimate heir. And in view of what has happened, I declare Henry to be anathema and out of the church. I excommunicate him. He didn't write to Henry. He wrote to St. Peter. So this letter was widely distributed throughout Europe, and it was read at Mass on Sundays everywhere. So everybody knew that the German king had been excommunicated by the Roman Pope. Well, excuse me.
So I have a question for you. So the Bishop of Rome, which is the Pope at that point, they were one with the Emperor of Rome, which is just a small kingdom,
Right.
essentially. But what about the others? Like you have the kingdom of Lombard, Sicily, Germany, France.
Most of
What
them,
was their relations? I mean, now he excommunicated,
Communicated.
So, but would he appoint him, and would he anoint him as a king to be able to say, like, okay, you're out of the church? What was the real power of those kings?
Henry, the real power was the Holy Roman Empire.
But
Henry was also king of Germany and Holy Roman Emperor. He had a lot of power.
Yeah.
But he had an Achilles tendon. That is, that once he was excommunicated, he could not be emperor. It had to be a member of the Christian faith.
but Henry was in Germany.
Germany.
He was
How-
physically in Germany, but he was a Catholic.
Yeah.
So he was
I
excommunicated.
know that.
He
I'm
lost
just
it.
trying to figure out like what he wrote, because
What was
you
Germany?
at the same time you kept like all the independent kingdoms.
It was like,
He didn't write.
imagine that it was like the Holy Roman Empire and the other kingdoms, very much like the United States and the states. One over the other.
Because Germany wasn't
So
Germany
the
at
Holy
that point.
Empire was not like as if it was not in Rome.
The king was not in Rome. The king was
Yeah.
somewhere in Germany.
Somewhere.
And this is what happens now. The king is excommunicated. And he had enemies in Germany. Enemies who wanted to be king themselves. So they said, let's have a meeting and confirm this, that he cannot be king anymore. But let's invite the Bishop of Rome to come preside over this meeting
Oh,
in Germany. Right, very interesting. Henry gets word of the meeting, finds out from his spies which routes they were going to take, and decides to intercept them. So he is able to intercept them at the mountain castle of Canossa, way up in northern Italy, up in the Alps. Canossa means woman with gray hair, because when you look from a particular point on the way at the castle and the mountains and the snow and the troughs, it looks like a woman with long gray hair seen from behind. So that's what happened at Canossa. Canossa was owned by Matilda of Tuscany, who was a friend of the Pope. So when they got there, Matilda said, sure, Pope, come right in, make yourself at home. Bring your people in. I have a big castle here, big fire. We can all get warmed up. And you can wait here for the Germans to send their troops down and escort to escort you back to Germany. That was common at that time. You traveled from here to there. The other people sent an escort to escort you there and back and forth. So they are waiting for their escort at the castle of Canossa. But Henry arrives. Henry arrives with his wife and his young son, wearing only sackcloth. And it's cold, middle of January, the doors are closed. So what does Henry do? For 3 days and 3 nights, he paces back and forth in front of the door and under the battlements, calling out, giving voices. Your Majesty, Your Holiness, look at me. I am sorry for my sins. I want confession. I want absolution. Gregory, Pope Gregory, have mercy on me. How could the Pope not, being a priest, grant somebody confession and absolution and penance? He had to. He had to. So they negotiated through intermediaries for several days, and finally, Henry was admitted. And he was brought before the Pope. Here's Henry, here's the Pope, and he knelt before the Pope, asked for forgiveness.
But why would he do that? Because of the opposition back home, or because, I don't know, his Christian faith?
Because he wanted to remain emperor and king. It was in his own best interest to be forgiven.
he couldn't be the king if he wasn't of the church.
No, I know that, but I'm just wondering whether it's because of the situation in Germany or because he could have come in Rome and just kill the Pope. They were just doing that.
The Germans were ready to kick him out. He had and this was a very good excuse to kick him out. So he realized that the only way to outmaneuver them was to get absolution. And get absolution from the top dog.
This did not take the twist the way I thought. I thought he was going to go there and kill the Pope.
No,
That was what I was expecting.
no, he didn't. he humbled himself before the Pope.
Hmm.
And it was a great victory for the prestige of the papacy. Having the Holy Roman Empire, the King of Germany, kneel before the Pope to ask for forgiveness. That was really one of the great moments of the papacy. Now, as soon as they left, Henry went back to Germany, gathered his forces, and invaded Italy. He chased the Pope away. The Pope had to retreat to Castel Sant'Angelo for protection until the Normans came and rescued his throne. He even installed an anti-pope. So this was all temporary. Now, who won that canals? The king or the Pope? You can say that Gregory was skeptical of the king, but Gregory had painted himself into a corner. He had no choice but to grant absolution and forgiveness. It gave the papacy prestige, but it also reshaped the relationships between church and state. King Henry died excommunicated because, of course, the Pope excommunicated him again, but he died king. Gregory died in Salerno, and generally history claims that Canossa, this is the name of the whole episode, is Canossa, helped Europe to start to think about new forms of government and religion and civic life, to reevaluate all of these things, to the point that about 7 centuries later, there was a Canossa in reverse. And we will touch about that in some of our later sessions. This is an episode that I would like everybody to remember, because it's one of the great moments in the church history and the history of the papacy. Gregory the Eighth also initiated reforms. He had little success with lay investiture, but this was fixed by the Concordat of Worms. Heck of a word, but there it is.
I know some place, but still.
Here's the terms of the Concordat of Worms, about who can invest or appoint who. As far as the Pope was concerned, the temporal and spiritual powers were defined. This you can do, this you cannot do. Elections were to be free for the people of Rome, no bribes, no violence, and the princes could not invest with the ring and the crozier. Those were forbidden because only the bishops could do that. Those were the hallmarks, the identifying items of the bishop. On the other hand, a bishop or abbot could be invested with temporal powers, that is, with ruling powers, like being mayor or being duke or being governor, by receiving the scepter. In Germany, major elections would take place in the presence of the emperor. What actually happened in the end was that the quality of the candidates improved tremendously. This really led to an improvement in the intelligence, in the ability to negotiate, in the communications between candidates and officials.
But at this point, still the Pope is elected by the people of Rome.
At this time, the Pope was still selected by the people and the clergy of Rome.
But then you have the granted with the papal land.
With the papal lands, it was the ruler of all the papal lands.
So these people who were in papal land, they would not elect the Pope, just the Rome.
No, they would send their money in, they would pay taxes, They were subject to papal justice.
But just people from,
The other people of Rome. We're getting there. We're getting there.
interesting.
Urban II was also at Cluny, and he was dedicated to reforms. He was more conciliatory than the others. He faced an anti-pope. He endorsed the truce of God. The truce of God was an edict by which the knights would avoid fighting on certain days of the week on weekends. This sounds barbaric to us, but the knights, like the ones that we're going to see went in the crusade, when they came back to Europe, they were so used to fighting that they would attack people for no reason at all. Attack and hurt people. So the truce of God was made by the Pope, directing the whole of Christendom to not fight each other on Tuesdays or Fridays or weekends. On the other days, it's fine to kill each other, but not on those days. That's the truce of God. The peace of God related to clergymen. It was always illegal or sinful to attack a clergyman. It was one of the problems Don Quixote had, that he did attack the clergyman. So that's the difference between the truce of God and the peace of God. The importance about Urban II was that he called the first crusade. The idea of the Crusades was to protect pilgrims from Europe on the way to the Holy Land, which at that time was controlled by the Muslims. There was also a hope that the Eastern and Western churches could be united under the Roman rites to heal the schism that was present since 1054. There was also the pursuit of adventure and travel, and also the, quote, liberation of holy places. In many ways, some of these things are still going on. One thing for us to remember is that the Crusades were primarily a papal project. It was the papacy that was behind the Crusades. Constantinople, true, requested help against the Turks. Key cities in the Middle East were liberated, but most crusaders got to Jerusalem, turned around, and went back to Europe. Genoa and Venice became powerhouses. And the end result was that the Mediterranean became a soup of many different cultures that intertwined with each other and really enriched Europe and made it ready for the Renaissance. That was a major benefit of the Crusades. All right, let's do this and then we'll quit. In the 13th century, one of the key, if not the key, Pope was Innocent III. Innocent III was again a Roman, but he had been educated in Paris, Bologna. He had served several popes as envoy, so he knew diplomacy. He was very, very, very well educated and was only 37 when he was elected pope. The life expectancy at that time was in the 40s, so it's not unusual. In any event, he was a very, very good choice. He maintained the territories for the Bishop of Rome. He had a very active role in politics, wrote many letters, accepted the Franciscans and the Dominicans. He called the Fourth Crusade. And he also convened the Fourth Lateral Council. The Fourth Lateral Council was very interesting in the sense that 70 decrees were approved, and there was never any debate. All the bishops traveled to Rome, they sat down, they were presented with the proposals. There was no debate, they all voted in favor, and they were unapproved. There was no debate in the Fourth Lateral Council.
But were they coerced to vote in favor, or did they?
Oh, they didn't
agree?
have to be told.
Okay,
It's like Republicans in the Senate, they don't have to be told.
they're coerced.
They will vote. That's the same thing. So the mentality is the same.
Okay.
And the Fourth Lateral Council has some pretty nasty anti-Semitic clauses in some of its decrees, which remain in force for hundreds of years. All the decrees are on the internet, and they are very, very interesting to read.
So this is interesting. I'm sorry. So go back. Accepted the Franciscans and Dominicans into the church. So those
There were religious authorities, yeah.
priests were not, they were outside of the church?
Yeah, they were organized,
Right.
but then the church chartered them.
Oh, okay.
That's basically, you can organize a school,
Right.
and then you have to go to the government to give you a charter from those.
But the priests that were in the Franciscans
Yeah.
and the priests that were in it were considered Catholic.
Absolutely, they were legitimate.
Okay.
They were legitimate. This is a picture of the Lateran Basilica. All these activities in Rome took place here. This was the Church of Rome. To this day, if you want to go to the Cathedral of Rome, you go to the Lateran Basilica, not the Vatican. The Vatican is not the cathedral of the Diocese of Rome. The Lateran Cathedral is, and right next to it, is the Lateran Palace. Very easy to get through. There is a metro stop about right here. Very, very easy to get to the Lateran. Beautiful, beautiful place.
But that was the building 900 years ago that they met in.
No, this was a Renaissance building.
Oh.
It's been rebuilt, it burned down, it rebuilt, it burned down, and then this was built during the Renaissance. But still, it's still very, very beautiful, worth visiting. So Pope Innocent III thought very highly of the papacy and very highly of himself too. But you could say that Innocent III was the summit of the medieval papacy. He claimed supremacy over all the Christian kings. He advanced a lot of reforms. He refined canon law because he was an attorney himself. And he really increased the prestige and the stature of the medieval papacy. He was the top dog of the popes of the Dark Ages. We'll quit after this slide from the writings of Malachi Martin. If you are interested in church life or true fiction, if that exists, try to find out books by Father Martin. Father Martin was a Jesuit. He quit the priesthood. He was also an exorcist. And he had a wonderful gift for writing, particularly about the popes. He has a huge volume called Conclave. That is, again, a history of a fictitious conclave. Europe at this time was dominated by the papacy. The legitimacy of all rulers in Europe depended on the Roman Pope. The peoples of Europe depended on the Roman bishop for definition of their civil order, political authority, economic well-being, humanistic development, and religious security. So any book by Father Martin is endorsed. He doesn't say anything extraordinary, but the things he says very, very well. All right, on that point, let's, with their, that's slide number what?
You're gonna start on 39, PowerPoint 2. I made a note.
39. We'll have a big session next week.